What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. We are going to take a look at a few clips from last night's Question Time show. This time they've tried not to look so blatantly biased, since we actually have 3 Brexiteers on the panel, in the form of Ian Dale, Kwasi Kwarteng and the Brexit Party chairman Richard Tice. They are joined by some of the EU Collaborator Coalition, Labour's Emily Thornberry, the Liberal Undemocrats Layla Moron and the waste of oxygen known as Ian Blackford. They are of course joined by Fiona Camel-Toe Bruce, so it's still a Remain biased panel, but much less than usual. Well done, the BBC. They are taking questions from the audience about Labour's Remain position, Boris Johnson and of course Brexit in general. We will focus mainly on audience questions and the nonsense Emily Thornberry comes out with, which is epic. So let's check it out.
The audience to begin with. The man in the blue t-shirt there.
Do you think one of the reasons that Boris Johnson wanted to prorogue Parliament is the last 3.5 years you lot have done absolutely nothing to get us out of I'm a Remain voter, but yesterday watching the Prime Minister's Question Time, when Emily and yourself were shouting when the Prime Minister was trying to talk and try and get his point over, it's absolutely disgraceful. It's a time that the decision is taken away from you.
The man there in the...
So we started off with a Remain voter who watched the performance of these EU MPs in Parliament yesterday, shouting over the Prime Minister because they did not like what was being said. Which, let's be honest, is just showing John Berco's treachery, since he should stop that shit instantly, when over the last week he has allowed it to go on mostly unchallenged. This Remain voter rightly calls it disgraceful, and he feels these worthless shitweasels should have the power to make decisions taken away from them. I couldn't agree with him more, and a general election will do that, which is exactly why these EU collaborators don't want one right now. Their deceit is still fresh in the mind, even Remain voters despise them, as you see here.
Glasses.
Yeah, hi. I think the issue Mr Blackford and the SNP have is that once we leave the EU, they're going to find it very difficult to convince all the Scottish voters to go back into the EU, to actually join the Euro, to actually join the Eurozone, to join all of that, when once we left and gained independence from the EU itself.
The next audience member rightly points out the reason Ian Blackford and his SNP tosspots are so against leaving the EU. It's because if they ever did get independence, the people of Scotland would not allow them to rejoin it, which is correct. But we do have to remember the SNP has a history of ignoring what the Scottish people want and run the country in a way that best suits them, not the people of Scotland. If they was in charge of an independent Scotland, they would drag the country into the EU without the people's consent. They've already ignored 2 referendums in 2 years, so evidence suggests they would do the same again if the people were asked, that is. You can shake your head all you like, Ian, it still won't change the basic fact that this guy has hit the nail on the head.
A couple of things here. I think the issue of trust in political parties and politicians was raised. I have a direct quote from the Labour manifesto in 2017. Page 24, Labour accepts the referendum result. Now, in the last 2 years, you have said that you want to campaign against the referendum, you want to scrap that result. So why should anyone trust you?
It's interesting because
why should anyone trust you?
Emily
Why should anyone trust you?
Emily talked about liars.
Yeah.
Emily, in November 17, in an interview with The Guardian, you said, I quote, "I don't think we should be undermining our democracy. You just can't do it. You just can't do it."
That's
and
right.
now you want to stop Brexit completely. You want to campaign for Remain. So that actually makes you a liar.
Well...
So we hear from the Tory Cabinet Minister quoting Labour's manifesto from 2017, which I absolutely love because of the look on Emily's boat race is priceless. This snivelling shitweasel knows he is about to call her out for the blatant hypocrisy of Labour's current position and likely the reason they don't want an election. We all know Labour's policy back then that they all got elected on was to honour the referendum, and now they have changed to the party of Remain. Of course, the Tory MP is anticipating that a lot of voters out there, and some watching this show, might not know that. I am surprised that Fiona let him do it though. We then hear the Brexit Party chairman Richard Tice chime in because Emily has sat there calling Boris Johnson a liar, as I'm sure is a surprise to no one. But if quoting the Labour manifesto wasn't enough, he goes on to quote her 2017 Guardian interview where she said, "I don't think we should undermine democracy," clearly stating Brexit needs to be done in order to uphold democracy. Now, changing that to "fuck democracy, we have to remain." In Labour's opinion now, that's the democratic thing to do, it seems. It is really amazing how this bitch can sit there calling Boris Johnson a liar, which I've cut out for the sake of time, when her whole position is a complete lie compared to what she was elected on, regardless of what her constituents actually voted for in the referendum. I am so glad she is being called out for her complete bullshit on the BBC. When the audience applauds her, you can see the bitterness and contempt she has for the everyday voter. Remember, this is within the M25, so this place is going to be full of Remainers, and even they are not safe from her dirty looks. How this woman is an MP with an attitude like that is incredible. That is the stare of death if ever I have seen it. I guess this thunder cunt does not like being mocked by these mere peasants. The entitlement of this bitch clearly knows no bounds.
I campaign to remain. I want to remain. I think it's in our country's interests. But I am a Democrat, and after we lost the referendum, I woke up the next morning and thought, right, I'm a public servant, I've got to do as I'm told, but the type of way in which we leave the European Union, because I tell you what, no deal was definitely not on the ballot paper. The way that we leave the Union,
Leave was on the ballot paper.
the way that
Full stop.
there are many ways you leave the European Union. The most important thing to do is to
leave.
look after jobs and the economy, so people don't lose their jobs.
And for 3 years, both ways,
and for
say we'll respect the referendum, and then say actually I want to
hang
remain
on,
now.
that's what it takes on to the next bit, which is for 3 years. Labour desperately tried to leave, but we tried to leave in such a way that we would look
Why did you
after
vote
jobs
against
and the
the deal?
economy. Because
Why
it
did
didn't
you
have
vote
because it
against
didn't
the
have a
deal?
customs union
So
in
you
it,
voted
because
against
it
the
didn't
deal
have
3
being
times.
close to a single market,
voted against
and
no
it
deal.
didn't pass our 6 tests. We spent weeks and weeks negotiating with you guys, trying to explain to you that actually our way of leaving the European Union would work. Now, I believe the centre ground has been burnt away. We have an extreme Prime Minister who's going for no deal. There is no centre ground anymore. So, in my view, it's a long time since we had the referendum. I want us to go back to the public and say, did you vote for this?
So in
Because if you voted for this, fine, but if you didn't, then
So in
let's
20
remain. And I continue to believe, as I have always said, and I've always been truthful about it, I'm not pretending that I think it's in our interest to leave the European Union, but I will do what I'm told. And we did try for 3 years to leave, but frankly, we have been in opposition, and now we have to work out what we do next.
No, Richard, wait 1 second. Because I can imagine that people at home are thinking, oh my God, these politicians just shouting at each other, talking over each other, I can't make sense of it, and they're all just being horribly rude to each other. Do you know what? Let's just take a breath a minute. And let's try and understand, we're in a situation, and we've had an extraordinary week, thank you, an extraordinary week in Westminster. And a lot of people are thinking, what on earth is going to happen next? Where are we going to go from here? How are we going to get out of this? So let's go to our next question.
Well, she claims she is a democratic politician, even though it's now well established that she wants to wipe her smelly gammon hangers with the democratic vote in 2016, and tries to use the lame excuse no deal wasn't on the ballot paper as a way to defend her current position, which is not only pathetic, but smacks of desperation. Richard Tice points out they voted to leave, they did not vote for more than that, which is correct. I have said it many times. The people voted to leave, no terms was attached to that vote. The terms were agreed by Parliament when they invoked Article 50, 498 MPs to 114, which is about as unanimous as it gets in the Commons. So Parliament agreed the terms and set it in law, which these EU collaborating MPs are now trying to change because Maybot's left the government. Their whole plan was based around her stalling Brexit and getting through a deal that gave us the illusion of Brexit while actually keeping us in there. Brexit in name, not in reality, is what these traitors had planned. Even Fiona Camel-Toe Bruce pipes in and states you can't have it both ways, Emily. That doesn't deter her though. She goes on to claim Labour have been trying to leave for 3 years, even though they voted against the terrible Maybot deal and were right to do so, but now are trying to delay Brexit indefinitely. As soon as the Brexiteers attempt to call out the bullshit she has just said though, Fiona steps in and prevents any responses. That was very impartial of you, Fiona. Why are you trying to protect the Labour MP from deserved criticism? Oh yeah, I know why. You are a Ramona.
Which is from Rachel McCluskey.
If you're so sure the public don't want a no deal, why not allow a vote on the 15th?
That's a very good point.
So, Emily, what is going to happen? Because I certainly, and I'm following this very closely, am unsure about what the Labour position is.
Yeah.
Assuming that the bill goes through the Lords, and becomes law, are you going to support Boris Johnson calling for an election on Monday?
No, we're not going to support Boris Johnson. Because what we want to do more than anything else, listen, in our hearts, in our bones, we want a general election. Of course we do.
Why don't you vote for one?
But at the moment, the emergency is that we have a dishonest Prime Minister who will use every means possible to get us out of the European Union without a deal. And that will lead to a lack of medicines. It will lead to queues around the block for petrol. Listen, this is government papers that I'm quoting. It's government papers that we're quoting. And a lack of medicines. I raised the issue of lack of medicines, and since I raised it in Parliament a few days ago, I have been inundated with people telling me that they have had conversations with their doctors about concerns about if we leave the European Union without a deal, that there will be blockages, there will be problems in the ports, that there will be 48-hour delays, and people will not get their
Presumably you think you'll win and then take charge.
Why wouldn't you do that?
So the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we stop no deal. The offer that Boris Johnson made us, that we should have a general election, was under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which, to get technical, is under Clause 3 would allow the Prime Minister to set the date. Now, guess what? Because we don't trust the Prime Minister, the opposition parties working together are saying, I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but we're not going to just give you a blank cheque. We're not just going to go,
okay,
yeah, all
so
right, we'll have a general election.
When do you want the election to happen?
Because you know what he will do. He'll have the election on the 1st of November.
So, no, when do you want this election to happen then?
So I think that we should have a general election when we can be certain that we will not be leaving the European Union without a deal.
And when is that?
And the difficulty is...
No, when is that?
Well...
Because you're going to be asked on Monday.
Yeah, okay.
So when do you want this election? What date are we talking about?
So what we need...
Of course.
The truth is,
so when we have...
The truth is, she doesn't want to be told because she knows that she's going to lose.
Can we let Emily answer the question?
Well, she's had a
when
good...
do you want it?
Is it the Emily
That's
Thornberry
all right.
show?
It certainly isn't, but I think people want to know the answer to this question.
I'm sure you know better than I do what I think.
I think he does.
Okay, you just let her off the hook.
Generally, oppositions want an election whenever possible because they think they can win. You
But
don't
not
want an
at a
election
time
because
of national emergency.
You know that you've betrayed
Let
5 million
talk.
Labour voters who are not going to vote for you. They're not going to vote for you in this election, and you will lose.
No.
That's the reality.
No.
You're scared.
No, absolutely not. Listen, we want to stop the food banks. We want to stop
and
letters from...
We've heard all that.
We do.
And
we want to have a general election.
We've heard all that.
But we have to stop no deal first.
This is the second big U-turn. I said that on 2017 you said that Labour accepts a referendum result, which you clearly haven't, and want to overturn. The second big U-turn is that for every week I can remember the last 2 years, you've demanded a general election. Yeah. Corbyn is on video, on YouTube, saying, I want a general election. And when he was offered the chance, here you can have a chance to have a general election, he ran away.
Because we know that you are using it as a distraction,
and the reason why,
and you will do damage to our country in the meantime.
But if you all talk over each other, I'm just going to go to the audience.
But I want to pick up what the lady in the audience said. She said that the reason why you're avoiding an election is because you think you'll lose. And that's exactly what people believe.
The man in the blue shirt.
Right, so we get down to the nitty-gritty finally. The Labour MP is being asked what they plan to do if their bill goes through and becomes law. Will they then support a general election? Which Emily claims she wants a general election more than anything, but won't accept one now because of a dishonest Prime Minister, which is a bit rich considering we have already heard her dishonesty called out with proof on this show before she moves on to the favourite scare story of the Ramonas right now regarding the ridiculous yellow snow leak spewed out by the mainstream media constantly. The audience joins in with the panel heckling her for spreading these blatant lies around the country that personally I think everyone is sick of now. She doesn't care though, we already know she hates the audience and Brexiteers. She doubles down on her stupidity by claiming that she received some emails from her constituents regarding yellow snow, and that makes her right, when if you listen to what she actually said, it's clearly a blatant lie. She claims these people who emailed her spoke to their doctors and was told a no-deal Brexit will cause medicine shortages, which is obviously complete bollocks since the doctor has no idea about the stocks and supplies of a pharmacy on any given day this week, let alone 6 months in the future. If Emily had said they spoke to their pharmacist, it would be at least believable, but their doctors telling them this just sounds like a story you made up while sitting there by someone who even lacks the basic ability to come up with a good lie. When asked why don't Labour have an election, take charge and stop Brexit, she uses the same old lame duck excuse that they have to stop Boris Johnson, when in reality it's of course because they know they will lose. Boris will get a majority and the Brexit Party will also join him in the House of Commons. There is also a possibility that the Lib Fems will start catching Labour because their flip-flop is going to drive a lot of people away to both sides. Labour are likely scared of all parties right now, especially when they have Corbyn leading them. We even get an audience member calling her and the Labour Party out for being cowards, before Richard rightly tells Fiona to allow someone else to speak, as it's not the Emily Thornberry show, because she has spoke a lot during this show, which luckily for you guys, I have cut out, because most of it was just the dribble you would expect from her. He then goes on to point out opposition parties usually want an election because they think they will win. So obviously, the Labour Party knows they won't win an election, because the Leave voters Labour has betrayed won't vote for them this time round. So Labour are scared and too busy dropping logs in their crusty knickers right now to think about having an election. You can actually see the Lib Fem MPs sitting there loving this, because Emily Thornberry is not only helping the Brexit supporting parties with her stupidity, she is also helping the Liberal Femocrats take their Remain vote, because even they can't trust Labour right now. Kwasi ends the clip pointing out, once again, the hypocrisy of Labour and the Commissar, like that's anything new.
You're not. You've got a Prime Minister that's lost... He is a dictator.
But you're in control.
Okay.
We are becoming in control.
You've got your head in your hands.
I'll tell you this. There will be an election over the coming period, but we will determine the timing over the course of the next couple of months. Once we've actually secured
so there might not be one until November?
Once we've secured the safety of not leaving the European Union at the end of October, we need to have an election. And I will give you this commitment that the SNP will campaign to win every seat in Scotland to make sure that we've got the right to choose.
Have you just given a commitment that you won't be calling for election until November?
No, I have not done that. What I've said is that we have to secure that we do not crash out of the European Union on a no-deal basis. I want an election as soon as possible, but we need to have the safety. We need to have the safety of making sure we don't crash out. I look forward to taking on every Conservative MP in Scotland that's failed to defend Scotland's interests, that's put our economy at risk. I want the end of Boris Johnson, and I want it as soon as is possible.
Iain
Right, I cut out most of that clip because Ian Blackford essentially repeats Emily Thornberry's bullshit word for word. We are going to focus on this idiot calling Boris Johnson a dictator, which is astonishing considering a dictator is someone who has all-encompassing power, which clearly Boris does not have, since you traitorous fuckpigs are trying to pass laws forcing him to get an extension. If he was a dictator, there would be no parliament, which, to be honest, also falls in with the Remainers' claim they want to stop the Boris Johnson coup. There is a coup going on, but it's not done by Boris. It's the EU collaborators trying to seize power from the government that are actually performing this coup, backed up by the media, since what it actually means is to seize power from the government, not the government seizing power itself, which is exactly what these traitors are trying to do. They are trying to seize power from the government. They have just been very clever about it by adopting the term against Boris, so that when they try to do it, it can't be used against them. It's true shitweasel behaviour. Likely the same reason they run around calling people fascist and shit. It's to hide the fact that their ideology has real fascist undertones. But the main reason I kept this in is because Ian Blackford let slip the Remainers' plan, which is to drag it out until November in the hope Brexiteers would stop supporting Boris, and I expect Brexit. They are trying to deflate the public's trust in Boris Johnson because they all know the Tories are miles ahead with Boris Johnson as the leader. He tries to deny it, but I'm sorry Ian, we are not buying it. November is when they plan to have this election, and it's because they're scared of Boris.
I'm slightly losing the will to live listening to this because...
How are you all feeling?
Is that all I get to say?
No, it's not. I just wanted to see what the response was there. There's a forest of us, I'll come to them. Go on, Ian.
Look, the issue is that the best way to stop a no-deal Brexit for Emily and for Ian is for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. And the way that happens is to win a general election. If there is an election on October the 15th and Labour win it, there will not be a no-deal Brexit. It is as simple as that.
But we can't be guaranteed what date he's
you
going
can't be
to give
guaranteed
us.
of winning. That's what.
No, we can't be guaranteed.
Yes, you can actually. You can because you could. A simple one-line bill could be passed guaranteeing the date. That could be introduced on Monday. Would you support that? If it was guaranteed to be October the 15th, would you support a general election on that date?
Not on the
Do you know? I mean, honestly with you,
briefly, Emily, because
just answer the question.
you a lot of time.
So honestly with you, Ian, We have a Prime Minister who's told us
Just
that he will not obey the law. He's told us he won't obey the law. We are in extraordinary times.
Would you agree?
In ordinary
if there was
times,
a law,
if a Prime Minister was subject to a law that said you must do this, then fine, I would be cool about it. But we're talking about Boris Johnson, and that is the problem.
Let's hear Layla.
So next up we heard from Ian Dale, who claims he's losing the will to live. I think that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but I understand his point. He rightly makes the claim that the best and only way to stop a no-deal Brexit for these people is for the Commissar to become Prime Minister. Which, we all know, as does Ian and Emily, it will never happen. Emily tries to use the same old nonsense once again that they can't guarantee Boris will stick to the date of 15th of October for a general election. Which is easily rubbish because not only did rees-mogg say it's 25 days from the dissolution of Parliament until an election, which would make it the 15th of October if done on Monday, but as Ian said, a simple one-line bill can be added to make the date set in stone. When asked if she would support that, both her and the SNP shitweasel tried to snake out of it, showing that the real reason they don't want one is because they know they will lose. Perhaps even the SNP are worried about the way Scottish people will vote in a general election if it was called now. They are nothing but traitors! And cowards who can't get what they want, so they will just pointlessly Ramon! Now let's hear a few more clips from the audience.
The woman there with the blonde hair in the grey top with your hand up.
I'm looking at all of you as everybody is and people watching on TV, and the opinion that people have of all of you guys who are in Parliament, in positions of power, is that you are absolutely disgraceful. People voted in the referendum to leave the EU. You are not respecting it. All I hear is I this, I that, the brother doesn't like the brother, and this and that, and it's absolutely pathetic. This country is having a tremendous bad reputation abroad, and it's all thanks to you. All of you guys in Parliament that cannot go ahead with the wish of 17.4 million people that wants to live.
Well, this lady put a shitter in Labour and Lib Fem's argument that only British racist people want Brexit. I don't want to judge where she is from, but I would be confident in saying that this woman was not born in the UK, and even she is disgusted with the way the politicians have acted. On both sides of the fence, I might add. The Tories are not innocent here, remember. I could not have said it better myself, though. The people voted in the referendum to leave the EU. These fuckpigs are not respecting it, and as I have said many times before, they only care about themselves and what they can use to smear each other. She absolutely nails it when she says about how these idiots are making the UK look stupid in the eyes of other countries. They should have her on this panel really, in my opinion. She stands up for the British voters more than our elected officials do. Whoever you are, lady, you are a legend. Well done for telling these worthless shitweasels some real home truths from someone with no side in this debate. She likely moved here thinking, as many people do, the UK is a great place and the home of democracy. Now she is starting to realise it was all an illusion by corrupt and traitorous fuckpigs called politicians.
So I'm going to ask you to be brief, Emily, but because I've been asking Labour what their Brexit policy is ever since I started this programme, which is January, and there's still something I'm not clear. Assuming that this bill goes through on Monday, because lots of us try and think what happens next, aren't we, I think. The bill goes through on Monday, and that there's not a general election called and agreed on that day. What Boris Johnson... No, let me put it this way. If you were to win a general election, which I think is the point you're getting to, you would go back to Europe, try and get a better deal, have a referendum where Remain is an option. Would you then be campaigning against your own deal to Remain? Against your own deal that you probably would have negotiated? Or would you be actually saying, no, support our deal? I mean, if I'm confused, I don't know... Which is it? Briefly. Are you going to campaign for your deal, assuming you get one, assuming you
I think
get
we've
into
had our
power?
answer.
Or will you campaign for Remain, against your own deal?
Personally, I will campaign to remain.
Even if you've negotiated the deal?
I will negotiate, to the best of my ability, a deal that will look after jobs and the economy, but the best way of looking after jobs and the economy is for us to remain.
Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds? That everybody watching you think people are going to vote for you on that basis? Have you no shame?
Have you any idea how the European Union are going to treat us if we negotiate in that way? Can you give us a nice deal, please? And then I'm going to vote not to have it in the first place. utterly ridiculous.
Okay.
And if we had...
So we get to a clip some of you may have heard about already. The host asked what Labour would do if they won an election, and the fact that their stance suggests they would get a Brexit deal from Europe, hold a second referendum, and then campaign for Remain against their own deal. Which in itself is ridiculous and contradictory, but she furthers the stupidity by admitting she herself would negotiate the deal and then campaign against her own deal. Iain rightly points out exactly how ridiculous what she just said is, drawing a large applause from the crowd. Why did the Labour Party let this imbecile appear on the show? This has not helped their cause in the slightest. We end that clip with the Brexiteers mocking her, and rightly so. She deserves it.
Because they were appalled at what Boris Johnson is doing to this country. If there's one thing he's done is actually unite people against his authoritarian grab of democracy. I'm sorry, I think people in this country don't want Boris Johnson and what he's doing.
I've been at rallies in Colchester, Lincoln and Doncaster in the last 3 nights with about 1,000 people. The anger out there, outside the M25, is absolutely palpable. People are furious, they want this done.
There's some anger in here within the M25. The man there in the glasses. Yeah, in the black T-shirt.
Hello, everyone. Let me tell you something. 3 years ago, I did not vote in the referendum. This is a true belief that most people that voted in the referendum don't understand what happened. What I feel these days...
I have to say, as I go around the country, often when people say that, there is the most enormous groan from people, because a lot of people feel they did know what they were voting for.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that.
Absolutely. I think that's very
I truly don't believe that. I also believe
are you insulting the intelligence of 17.4 million people in this country?
Anyway, could you finish your point, sorry?
Finish the question. Yeah, let me finish. Thank you. And I also believe that politicians are fearless these days. So that's what I believe.
Thank you.
So we heard the complete fucking idiot there, claiming that these people who voted to leave did not know what they voted for. Once again, Ramona's are questioning the intellect of at least 17.4 million people in this country, which rightly incenses the Brexiteers, drawing a round of applause from the audience. It amazes me we even have this situation, because if it was the other way round and Remain had won, there would not be this shit going on. The media certainly wouldn't be promoting it like they do the Remain position. His only other point was politicians are fearless, which makes me question if he's even been watching the same debate as we have. The SNP, Lib Fems and Labour MP have all shown just how lily-livered they actually are. They are scared of the British public, voting them out because they're EU collaborators and just want to keep taking our money.
The woman here.
Yeah, the document that was presented before Parliament for the actual referendum says in there that Parliament does not have to stand by whatever the people have voted for. So, even though I voted to leave, Parliament does not have to actually take our decision because they had already written a get-out clause in the document that led up to the referendum.
That's not right, because if you remember, 9 million households got a leaflet saying the government will implement what you decide, and that was the mandate to do exactly that.
Well, here we have someone who claims they voted to leave, making out like the referendum was only advisory, which is complete nonsense. Not only is what Iain said correct, but the politicians said they would uphold the result and since enshrined it into law, along with pledging it in their manifestos that they all got elected on. To try and use that as a valid argument is lamer than people saying they did not know what they voted for. It's ridiculous.
This law is really important because also in that bill, you give the decision as to how long we extend to the European Union. And if the European Union says, we'd like you to extend for 5 years, please, then that is it. We have to accept that decision because that's what you will vote for.
What we're trying to do, what we've done in this bill, is we've created a place of safety that we do not crash out of the European Union on a no-deal basis.
Answer his question.
Just answer my question. They could say 5 years, they could say 10 years.
The opposition parties are asking for an extension so we can get through
we know
to
that.
the end
Just
of next
answer his
January.
question.
And who makes the decision about the length of the extension, Ian?
At the end of the day, we need to get round the table with our European partners. They're not the enemy. It's not collaborators the way that you and your pals talk about.
You've surrendered. You've raised the white flag of this country to the European Union.
Just think about the language you're using. It's 80 years since the Second World War, and you're using language like that. It's an absolute disgrace, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
I think you should be ashamed.
Thank goodness the people in Scotland
people who don't respect democracy in this country should be ashamed.
No, I do respect the democracy.
You don't.
Because you live in a parliamentary democracy. And I come from Scotland. We voted to remain. Why wouldn't you respect the rights of the people in Scotland?
Can I just say, can we stop this being a slanging match?
Right, in that clip we had Richard explaining why the law these scumbags are trying to pass is so bad. As he said, it gives power to the EU over the UK in regards to how long we extend Brexit, which is exactly what these Ramonin traitors want. Ian tries to defend his bill, but refuses to admit that the EU would make the decision on any future extensions, which will be years, since they need our money to function. If ever you needed proof these Ramonin fuckers work for the EU, then this is it. They want them to control how long we are going to be sending money to the European Union. 1 billion a month will now be controlled by an unelected foreign body. It's obscene that our parliamentarians are even allowed to do this shit. How the crowd can clap this SNP dickhead is beyond me. They are collaborators, like Richard said, who have put up the white flags and surrendered the UK to the EU like they would if Scotland was independent. We are friends with the individual nations within the EU and their citizens, not the European Union itself, unlike the so-called Scottish National Party, who are now more like the Scottish EU Vassalage Party, as that's what they want for Scotland and its people. How Ian Blackford can claim he respects democracy when he has ignored the results of 2 democratic referendums within the space of 2 years, as I've already said, is truly amazing. The shit this guy chats, he really deserves an award for.
Do you think he'll do that? He's talked about, he'd rather be dead in a ditch than ask for an extension.
Well, I hope that he is
quit?
serious about wanting a deal. I believe him to be serious about wanting a deal.
There's no negotiations going on. There are no negotiations
let
going
Ian
on.
answer the question.
I think he's serious about wanting
There's
a
no
deal.
negotiations.
For goodness sake. What is the point of trying to have a debate when after every 5 seconds you interrupt?
No, I don't. The point is, it's a complete charade. It's a complete charade to say negotiations are going on.
I asked him a question and I want to hear the answer.
He's talking about something that's not happening.
Ian, I want to hear the answer. Do you want to hear the answer? Ian Dale.
Be quiet.
I think that... Look, we've all got to hope that there's a deal. I have never been a Brexiteer who has advocated no deal. I don't think that's the optimum solution at all. But there are 3 million people in this country, many of them watching this programme right now, who voted for the first time. People in their 40s, 50s and 60s who voted for the first time in the 2016 referendum because they thought their vote would actually count for something. And I'm afraid that Parliament has shown over the last 3 years that it didn't count for very much. And those people, and I hear them all the time on my radio show, those people feel betrayed, and I will use that word, even though I don't like using this sort of intemperate language. They feel betrayed, and most of them, a lot of them, will not vote in any future elections because they think, what is the point?
Right, well I've only included this last clip because it showcases Ian Blackford's constant interruptions and Fiona Bruce's complete inability to control this SNP shitweasel. It's literally all Ian can do when anyone points out what he does not want the public to know. The host eventually does get him to shut up, but it's clear she has no control over the Remainers, or does her best not to get control over them. Ian Dale is right that people voted during the 2016 referendum expecting their vote to mean something, and the last 3 years have proved it did not, so they likely won't vote again. I have heard people say that myself, so it would seem to be a common sentiment these days. Well done, politicians. So that will be the end of the video there, guys. I've had enough of this shit. It's mind-numbing even for me to deal with. I just want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribe members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.